Greetings once again, fellow travelers. This is Krotnip, welcoming you all back to the logbook of a simple Lindworm traveler. This week I was finally planning to release my first Science of Yaldabaoth unit analysis piece, but then Corvuspelli went ahead and released their Warcrow Rules 1.5 update, so obviously I had to pivot and try to do a quick analysis on that instead. As we are about to see, this update also quite clearly foreshadows the release and at least partial rework of the Science of Yaldabaoth, with their general release starting later this summer, early fall. And thus I'm pondering whether I should put any Science of Yaldabaoth analysis on into the ice for the time being, so as to not have them made irrelevant by changes immediately after. But that's a discussion for another day. Today, what we are going to be doing is taking a quick look at the rules update document. Future Krotnip here. I forgot to give a shout out I was planning to do, and I failed miserably at another, so I'm coming back to one of the first slides of the presentation to try and give credit for those who to whom it belongs. First, I want to shout out Orava. We met in a gaming day once again a while back, and he was nice enough to provide me with a 3D printed Caltrops template that he had scaled to fit Warcrow from some type of ninja game. That's what he told me. So thank you, Orava, for the template. As you can see from the first shot of this video, it's now in good use. Another shout out that I want to give is for the podcast crew of A Touch of Tinge. Been listening to pretty much all the stuff you've been releasing, and I highly encourage others to do so also. I try to reference you in one of the slides later on this video, but I butcher your podcast name horribly, so sorry about that, but I didn't want to re-record the whole slide since I have so little time at my hands at the moment, so you'll just have to do with this one. But any in my audience who aren't familiar with A Touch of Tinge podcast, Google it and you will find some more Warcrow content to listen to. Okay, now back to the presentation at hand. So what's on the menu today then? Corvuspelli has just released an update 1.5 to the Warcrow basic rules. This document incorporates a lot of the changes that have already been communicated through the errata and to some lesser extent the FAQ answers we have gotten so far. But in addition to these to be expected changes, this document actually includes quite a few large and important changes, updates, changes of direction even into how the game is supposed to be played. So we have quite some impactful things to discuss here today. I'm going to try and go through the biggest news and changes in this episode. But please do keep in mind that as this rules update is so very fresh, I am more or less shooting from the hip. I have done my best to try and parse through the document and pick up the things that I have not discussed earlier as part of my errata discussions. But there may be something that I'm missing, and I'm sorry about that. There might be something I get wrong, so sorry about that also if that happens. And also keep in mind that Corvuspelli has communicated to us that they are about to release a new FAQ in the aftermath of the rules update 1.5. So I expect some of the things that I'm going to be covering today to be either potentially changed, or rather some open questions answered going forward. But hey, if nothing goes terribly wrong, you'll have me reporting on those changes when they happen also. I've tried to go ahead and compile the various changes and updates of significance into a few categories, and I'm going to call them thematically rather than chronologically how they are communicated in the document itself, but feel free to browse read the document as we go along. The first large set of changes that I want to cover relates to the magic system that has been somewhat significantly reworked in this update document. The spellcasting sequence itself has been partially rewritten to be simpler. The tinge roll is also way simpler now, and the whole thing flows more naturally, and I think there are a lot less things to forget going through this process after everything is said and done. One of the big changes that this new procedure does is that it stops any tinge that the spellcaster has already gained, or any alterations that they add to their spell from making casting the spell more difficult. Back in the day, hundreds of years ago, when the first rule set for Warcrow was released last summer, the spellcaster had to willpower face to face the black dice produced by the alterations of their spell, as well as any black and potentially blue and green dice induced by the tinge that they had gained so far during the game, making successfully casting a spell more and more difficult the more alterations were involved, and the more tinge the spellcaster had already accumulated. But now all this is ancient history. You simply need to perform a successful willpower roll as is, and if there's a blocking attempt, then there's a face-to-face roll, but if not, it's just a simple willpower roll, and off you go. Tinge comes into play if the spell is cast successfully, and in this case a tinge roll will be applied, and the tinge roll will involve as many black dice as is instructed by the combination of alterations that the spellcaster used to empower their spell. But importantly, the amount of black dice cannot result in you adding blue or green dice to the roll, so effectively 3 black dice is the maximum here. The spellcaster will still receive a point of tinge per every hollow block symbol that they roll on this tinge roll, but afterwards the effects of tinge will always kick in if at the end of this roll the spellcaster has at least 1 point of tinge on their card. So no longer are we looking for the hollow special symbols that used to trigger the effects of tinge. Now the effects are applied automatically if the caster has any tinge at this point. Simple, effective, and impactful. Likewise, when a unit that has gained tinge through the battle is about to check whether the effects will trigger, there is no longer a dice roll involved, but rather the tinge's effects will always manifest automatically. This checking and applying of the tinge's effects has also been shifted from the beginning of the round to the very end of the round, after stress has been already removed due to the end of round condition. This is important in several ways, not least because previously during the third game round, units could effectively outrun the clock on tinge by accumulating as much as they wanted, as long as they didn't do something that would trigger tinge afterwards. I'm not saying this was commonplace, but this was technically possible. And since you would only check the effects of tinge at the beginning of the next round and there would be no next round, there would effectively be no price to pay in some cases for accumulating all that tinge later on. But now that the effects of tinge kick in at the end of each round, including the last, if you spend your last turn putting your spellcaster full of tinge, they will still explode spectacularly before the game ends, rather than getting to escape with their lives. So that's a nice change to have. The fact that there is also no roll involved, Tinge just applies its effects if your units have any, is also nice in that it not only makes the game simpler, but it also makes the Tinge feel like more of an impactful thing. The chance of rolling the hollow special required to trigger the Tinge's effects was previously quite low. So you were working with a situation where it wasn't all that common that you would get Tinge in the first place, then it would need to trigger via an unlikely process in order to its effects kick in, and then you would have to have enough and find yourself in a situation where the effects would actually have a meaningful impact on the state of play, and this meant that Tinge was rather unimportant a mechanic in the game, if we are being totally honest. But with these changes, Tinge should become, in my assessment, at least when measured by the amount of times that its effects kick in and have an impact on the game, more important a game element going forward, and I think that's really cool and really important. Tinge, the special way that spellcasting works in the world of Warcrow, and all the story elements revolving around this stuff, they are important in the world of Lindworm, and if they aren't important on the gaming table, then we are definitely missing something out. So I really like this change. How blocking spells happens has also been reworked to a lesser extent, but still importantly, and I also really like these changes. Previously, your spellcaster had to be within 20 strides of their opposing counterpart in order to try and block a spell. And this was a rather tall order in many cases, since 20 strides isn't all that much in a game of Warcrow, especially when spellcasters tended to hang back and try and avoid getting killed by ranged attacks and stuff. So it was rather hard for you to find the activations to advance your spellcaster to a safe enough place from which they could then try and block spells. Now blocking can be done regardless of range, so as long as you have a spellcaster in your force, in your company, you can try and go ahead and block an enemy spell. And this is really nice because it gives a lot more utility to spellcasters from a list building perspective. At the same time, unless we see some updates on the willpower of spellcasters, I doubt that blocking spells successfully is going to be a phenomenon, since most spellcasters have rather good willpower scores and they always have the opportunity to endure a point of tinge in order to add an automatic success to their roll. And when the spellcaster attempting to block the spell rolls the 3 black dice, that is the obligatory amount these days, you don't get to choose anymore, they only have a 25% chance per dice of gaining a block that could potentially hinder the casting attempt. And now that there are no other dice coming in from the spellcaster's alterations or the tinge they have already accumulated, there are so far fewer dice being thrown in this face-to-face roll against the willpower stat that I imagine that blocking spells is going to be rather rare going forward. The block roll can still inflict tinge upon the spellcaster during the blocking. If they roll any hollow block symbols, then they will receive tinge according to the amount of these, and if at least a single hollow block is rolled, then the effects of tinge will manifest at the end of the activation. Keep in mind, however, that blocking a spell does not cause the automatic effects of tinge to come into play unless you gain tinge from the blocking attempt itself. This is different to how the active spell casting I described previously works. Also do note that blocking a spell no longer causes a point of stress on the caster during the blocking, so that's also a improvement on this system from the point of view of the defensive spellcaster. The effects of tinge on the spellcasters have also been greatly streamlined, and I really appreciate this change. The previous table, which had so many different entries and you had to apply each and every one of them, was quite a drag, to be totally honest, and many of the results were not actually usually impactful on the battlefield itself, so you often felt that you had to go through all these things that did not make a big difference, only to get to those few ones that actually might, and in many cases none of the effects actually turned out to be all that important. Now we have two different tinge effects tables, one which is for all the other factions of the game and one that is for the science of Yaldabaoth forces. If you are familiar with the backstory of the game, the science of Yaldabaoth have a really close relation with the fog and the tinge, and they do not fear them and abhor them as other nations do. So having exactly the same mechanics when it comes to working with or rather against the tinge doesn't seem all that fluffy or that compatible with the backstory, so it would seem that from here on out they are working with their own set of rules. As for the general table, as long as the unit has anything between 1 and 4 tinge on them, they will suffer a point of stress at the end of the round at least, when the effects of tinge automatically kick in. And since this checking of tinge's effects happens during the end of round sequence after the stress relief of ending the round has already occurred, this point of stress is effectively a permanent pseudo permanent point of stress on the unit that needs to be cleared through resting or other methods. You can't simply wait for it to go away. Spellcasters who already have tinge on them and elect to cast a spell will effectively receive a point of stress for their trouble once they're done in any case, and if they are a spellcaster that has already activated during the round, this will actually mean that they will incur double stress on themselves for this activation, which should limit the amount of times one can cast spells with their spellcasters. Then again, most spellcasters do have a rather high moral value, so this isn't going to be that huge of a problem in many cases. Whereas previously the tinge's effects were cumulative and you had to apply every section of the table for until you reached the point where you had gone through all the effects that your amount of tinge would incur. Now each section of the table is separate, and I really appreciate that. If a spellcaster has 5 to 6 points of tinge on them, they will not only suffer a point of stress but also a point of damage, an automatic wound, which means that fragile spellcasting units will eventually succumb to this tinge effect if there is no way of healing them or otherwise stopping them from killing themselves via the effects of tinge. Maybe joining a unit and then passing on this this dangerous effect to a unit might be a way for some spellcasters to avoid this grisly fate. If a unit has gained 7 or more stress and it suffers the effects of tinge, then the unit will be entirely destroyed. Where previously units within a close proximity, that was 2 strides I think, would suffer wounds, now all units within 5 strides of the destroyed unit will suffer a point of tinge instead. And this is rather thematic. We can imagine that this dark, oily substance is consuming the spellcaster, and when it explodes outwards, other units, other characters might get caught up in this. This also means that units that traditionally don't get tinge, EA non-spellcaster units, can actually gain it via this effect, which I think is really cool and really important, and it makes tinge more universally important in the game, not just something that affects spellcasters and that's it. When it comes to the Scions of Yaldabaoth, a single point of tinge for their forces is fine and they don't suffer any ill consequences from that. 2 to 7 points of tinge will cause a random effect each time the effects kick in, and this effect can be either harmful or even helpful in its nature, and I really like how this brings in the capricious nature of magic, and the disregard for norms and safety and convenience that the Scions of Yaldabaoth seem to be all about. So this is a really cool mechanic. If the Scions dabble too deeply with the tinge, however, they will also be destroyed. In their case, the threshold for automatic destruction is 8 tinge or more. Speaking of tinge, it would appear that in the future some units will be able to consume tinge tokens from their card in order to empower alterations on their spells, and some units may even be able to fuel special skills using their tinge tokens. And this seems like a really strong indication, a foreshadowing on the fact that we are going to be seeing these types of skills and alteration abilities, at least on the Scions of Yaldabaoth forces going forward. And hence I believe that we are going to see some rewrites of the existing profiles also. This makes a whole lot of sense in the backstory. The Scions creed includes accepting, welcoming tinge as important, natural, even spiritual, and having units that can actually make use of tinge feels really science-y. So I really like the idea of these types of skills going forward. At the same time, tinge is going to, I suspect, remain a volatile resource, and any units looking to leverage it to their advantage must at the same time contend with the potential negative effects and live with the fact that if they ever should gain too much of the good stuff, so to speak, they will be blown to smithereens all the same. There's also going to be a new keyword, or now there is a new keyword that accumulates automatic tinge for units possessing it. I would imagine that the importance of this keyword comes up with units that are looking to use their tinge tokens to power tinge skills or their spell alterations, and this gives them access to the minimal amount of tinge required for these abilities to be usable. So I really like this idea. There's also going to be some units going forward that will be able to consume tinge tokens in order to trigger switch abilities or modifiers on their rolls. And again, I like how Corvuspelli is using familiar and proven mechanics with a unique twist to their advantage. So really like this design choice also. In the next section, I'm going to be going through some changes as they relate to activations, combat, and stress. Potentially the biggest change forthcoming in the rules update 1.5 is lifting the restriction on what simple actions a unit can combine during their activation. Previously, a unit activating was allowed to either perform a single long action or two short actions, simple actions rather, one of which had to be moved, which essentially meant that units would be moving plus doing something, or if they would be unable or unwilling to move, simply doing one thing basically, and that's it. But now units are allowed to combine two simple actions, whatever they are, when they activate. While attacks per se are a single type of simple skill, simple action, and thus you cannot do attack even if you would like to do a melee attack and a ranged attack, for example. There are plenty of units that can leverage this newfound freedom for special actions plus attacks, or even special actions that end up performing attacks that can then be further combined with a traditional attack, which effectively means that double attacks are on the menu for some units at least going forward. Someone like, for example, the Northern Tribes Tundra Marauders can now potentially use the Snow Leopard Tattoo to place, to engage an enemy and attack them, and then use the second simple action to attack them yet again, which feels quite powerful. I think this changes also a stealth buff to spellcasters, since spellcasters have access to these spell skills, spell abilities, and if they are, for example, in melee, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to perform both a melee attack and then casting of a spell. It says, to clarify on the rules document, that if you perform a special skill that includes, for example, a melee attack component, the skill is still considered to be that special skill, and you don't use up your attack possibility for an attack activation during that activation. So I think that's pretty clear enough on double attacks being okay going forward. The amount of different actions that units have access to while engaged has already been added to. Previously, you could only attack, move to disengage, or cast a spell that affects either the caster or the unit they are engaged by. But now you are also allowed to perform a skill or a tinge skill if the said skill / tinge skill affects either the unit that's engaging you or your unit itself. I'm interested to see how this is going to be applied going forward. Does the ability have to specifically call out target self, or is, for example, using the Snow Leopard Tattoo considered to be okay with this as to the regards of this update? As to regards of streamlining the gaming process and making it more intuitive, stress accumulation has now been made more clear, Previously, there were some situations where the unit would gain stress at the end of its activation, and it felt weird that you had to mark that, okay, I'm going to receive this point of stress at the end of the activation, but I don't actually have it right now, so I'm going to place it next to my card but not on my card, and now I can go over my morale because I don't yet have this stress. But now all this is effectively gone. Stuff like suffering stress from being defeated in combat or activating your unit again is going to be applied immediately, and that makes it easy to follow, intuitive to use, and also easier to be taught for new players. And also this stops units that previously were able to do this, oops, now I'm over my moral threshold because I get more stress at the end of the round. Oh well, I will just have to pass a willpower test and remove the stress stuff from happening. I'm guilty as charged on this one. I have been doing this a whole lot with my battles card, for example, going over stress via activating them second and third time during the round, applying modifiers effectively for free, and then passing my willpower test to shed the extra stress. But that's not going to be working going forward, and I really like that. Again, more streamlining, more intuitive gameplay, better gaming experience. Another really impactful change that I really like is that units that are full on stress but have not activated this round, they have no activation token on them, can still activate normally. Previously, the red text there that specified that a unit that has both an activation token and at least as much stress as it has morale can only activate to rest. The activation token part was not there, so a unit that was full on stress could actually never activate except to rest. And this made it possible to do as, for example, I did in my battle report that I posted last week, where I would be able to engage a enemy unit at the beginning of the round, put it full of stress, and by engaging them, holding them in melee, stop them from activating because they couldn't rest and they couldn't activate traditionally. And this felt a little icky to me. It took the power of activating a unit that you have spent all those points for away from the player, and there was really little that they could do about it. This change means that every single unit should usually get at least one activation per round should they choose to try and use it. And I really like this change. It also means that going full on stress or finding yourself full of stress isn't the end of the world anymore, as it in some cases tended to be previously. Speaking of being full on stress, there's a big change on how willpower tests work as in regards to a unit suffering from overstress. Previously, it used to be that no matter how far beyond its moral threshold a unit was pushed, it would always be able to discard the excess stress by succeeding in a simple difficulty 1 willpower test, meaning that it only required a single success on all its dice to pass the test. What this mechanic has translated to in the games that I have played so far has very much been a situation where both players, mindful of the importance of not having your units demoralized by excess stress, have built unit combinations that have produced very stress shock resistant combinations. When a unit is rolling 2 or more willpower dice, and there are at least some orange or even red dice involved, passing a difficulty 1 willpower test can be almost trivial, especially so if there are rerolls or any other methods that can help facilitate passing of the test. But now, going forward, if a unit is 2 or more stress above its moral threshold, when it has to roll its willpower test to avoid breaking and fleeing, being demoralized that is, the test will be upgraded into a difficulty 2 willpower test that requires 2 successes to pull off. And this is really huge. Single success requiring and 2 success requiring willpower tests in Warcrow are worlds apart. For some units, namely I'm talking about many basic infantry units without character attached, getting 2 successes is out of the question altogether, even in theory. And for many units that are working with, let's say, a orange and a yellow willpower dice, getting success on both is quite hard. So passing this test is going to be really unreliable, and now players are heavily encouraged to try and avoid situations where the unit will be suffering from 2 or more overstress to avoid having to pass a test like this. At the same time, this change does mean that units with higher than average ability to pass these tests are going to be more valued than before. If your unit was, for example, capable of accessing 3 dice when rolling for willpower, well, now their comparative value has gone up, since they aren't that afraid of getting overstressed by 2 or more points. Likewise, if you have access to rerolls, that's pretty great. And there are even some units that can allow for an automatic passing of a willpower test, and these just became quite powerful. Looking at you, Varang Hersir, my favorite character of the Northern Tribes, even before this change. What this change should also enforce upon us is more units being demoralized and forced to flee during games. So far in my battles, having units flee has been a rather rare an occurrence, and the situations where this has come up have usually been about some type of combination that has caused a unit to flee via magical or skill-based means, and units breaking simply from being stressed has been exceedingly rare. But now, going forward, if and when we can engineer situations where our enemy's troops will be 2 or more above their stress level, it's quite likely that many of the enemy units will start breaking, and likewise we have to guard ourselves against the same happening to us. So we need to start building the lists with this more in mind. So that means that if you have any pieces that help buff up the willpower score of your units, help them pass their tests, or maybe rally automatically, looking at you, Evoker, then the need for such pieces has just gone up. Yet another impactful change that comes from the rules update 1.5 regards how multiple combats work going forward. Previously, a unit that was engaged by several enemy units at once had to sacrifice a dice or an automatic symbol from their roll per every unit of enemies engaging them beyond the first. But from here on out, you will only ever need to sacrifice a single dice or symbol, and there is no cumulative penalty for being engaged by several enemy units at the same time. Also, previously, if a unit engaged by several enemy units at once declared an attack against one of them, they had to endure an opportunity attack from all the other units that they were not attacking. And like the guys at Touched by the Tinge podcast, I heavily recommend you listen to them also, pointed out, that felt like penalizing something that you were supposed to be doing. Warriors in melee are supposed to fight, and getting penalized for doing just that doesn't feel all that great. This previous multiple combat system also made it possible that if an enemy was able to swamp a unit with several of their own, then they could effectively mobility kill and even downright kill the unit quite easily as a result. And I like how changes like this and the change to how a unit can activate even if it's full on stress when it does not have an activation token on it helps remove situations from the game where a player feels that they have no agency, they can't do anything about a situation, and they are locked in and unable to fight back. So I like this change quite a lot. It also means there's less stuff to remember, and the flow of the game should be faster due to these changes. Alright, next up, characters have been buffed in several ways, so prepare for some heroics everybody. Firstly, this is a entirely new rule or entirely new restriction that greatly increases the survivability of many characters. Ranged attacks are from here on out disallowed against enemy characters that are within 5 strides of a large friendly unit or friendly to them unit, or a unit that's made up of at least 2 or more troops. Previously, many characters were horrendously vulnerable to getting picked off by ranged attacks of the opponent, like for example the Evoker with their paltry 2 wounds and effectively only a single black dice defense against ranged attacks. It was impossible to bring an Evoker anywhere near the front line against an enemy that had really any ranged presence, or the Evoker would get taken off the table immediately. But now this rules change should mean that as long as characters stay close to units where they in many cases belong, they are protected from such sniping unless there is some special ability at play that makes a snipe attack like this viable. Do keep in mind, however, that when you are measuring range for stuff like this, you need to be measuring that 5 strides from the leader of the unit in question to the character. So the character really has to stay really close to the unit, providing them the safeguard against missile attacks, or you can easily find yourself in a situation where you nudge the character or nudge the unit for whatever reason, move them a little bit, and then you find yourself out of range and you get whacked. So be careful with this. All in all, I think this is a nerf to ranged units throughout the game, since one of their core specialties, that is killing solo characters at range, has just become all that more difficult to achieve. I don't have, as of right now, a solid take on whether the ranged units in Warcrow are too powerful, not powerful enough, or just right. But this surely not just a thing against the ranged attackers going forward. Another really big and impactful change when it comes to how characters play is that how characters leave their units has been reworked. Previously, a character leaving a unit had to effectively use their entire activation to do so, and they could only do a move plus move activation or short action combination. So that meant that the opportunity cost of leaving a unit was extremely high, and I really rarely saw this happen on the battlefield. Mostly the times I saw a character detach from a unit during a game was a situation where, for example, the unit was in melee and the character had to evacuate in order to go and capture an undefended objective or something like this. So that has been really rare to see, and usually characters have been staying with their units until one or both get wiped out. But in 1.5 and going forward from here, a character leaving a unit simply needs to announce at the beginning of their activation that, okay, now I'm leaving the unit, and from that point on they will immediately start acting as a solo character, and they are free to declare whatever combination of actions they wish to pursue. And this is a huge change. This opens up possibilities like charging from your unit at something, breaking off from the unit to fire a ranged weapon, or maybe cast a spell, use a activatable ability, or whatever combinations people can come up with. So that's really important. One of the things that I was asking in a previous FAQ email I sent to Corvuspelli has also been answered here, because previously there was no clear indication on how tinge tokens should be dealt with when a character is joining / leaving a unit, but now we have that added to the rules as well. So this is really good to see. So I would consider stock of any characters that benefit from being escorted to the front line, but who will then rather walk alone, has now gone up, as have those of any units that are capable of doing the escorting and then don't mind going at it alone after, either because they are capable of acting on their own and being valuable, or due to the fact that they are so cheap that it's okay to spend the points and activations this way. One of the first things that came to my mind was using the champion of Emberseek, who, let's face it, wants to fight alone, usually in a counter-attacking fashion. You can now have her join a unit of Bucklermen, for example. Use the Bucklermen to cart the duelist, the champion, to the front line, and then she can say adieu to the rest of the groups and go and fight on her own. And now the Bucklermen are free to occupy objectives or screen units or whatever, but they can still be useful. And hey, the escort unit only cost you 20 points from the get-go, so no problems there. So a good change in my opinion. And then some changes on states and keywords. All the basic states, that is frightened, slowed, disarmed and vulnerable, have gone through some changes in this update. Frightened now forces the unit that has been frightened to reroll only those dice in which they have obtained any successes, which means that passing a willpower test while suffering from frightened just got a whole lot harder. At the same time, previously you needed to pass a willpower test to shed frightened, but now if you only have to apply its effects, if you have to reroll anything, then you get to shed the state anyway. So now this works more closely like the rest of the states in this regard. It did take some cognitive power to remember that the other states are removed as long as they get to affect a unit, but frightened stays on until you pass the willpower test, but now that is gone from here on out. This load update is pretty much what was already in the errata, but now it's been baked into the core rules. Slowed units get to choose which one of their movement values to sacrifice when moving, and they shed the state via charging, which wasn't in the original text but was errated later. Disarmed and vulnerable states also got more powerful in this update. In addition to their ability to discard a dice with a success / block on them depending on the state, they now also stop the units suffering from them from adding offensive / defensive modifiers to their rolls. So these states just got way more powerful. Interestingly enough, there's some editing mistake there, but the wording on the vulnerable seems to suggest that being locked out of using a modifier does not cause the state to expire. But you have to have a situation where a dice is removed due to the state for the state to be removed at the end of that activation. So that is rather interesting. This means that if this isn't changed going forward, disarmed and vulnerable can have effects without the states quote unquote triggering and being removed as a result. But as a Northern Tribes player, these are changes that I absolutely love to see. The Northern Tribes have a really large amount of units that are capable of causing various states, including a lot of units that can cause vulnerable and or disarmed. So this is going to make our forces even more deadlier going forward. This is yet another thing that I had been asking for earlier. What should happen should a unit gain immunity to a state if they already have the set state? These can come up, for example, with Njord and his totem of the Cavern Lion. After suffering a wound, Njord becomes fearless, but what if he had already obtained the frightened state beforehand now? And now it's been made clear that if you gain a immunity to a state and you already possess the said state, then you get to remove it immediately. So this makes a lot of sense. It's quite intuitive, but now it's been spelled out, so there is no confusion about the situation. Bloodlust has been updated to also work with assaulting. So if a unit with Bloodlust is able to assault an enemy unit, even if they would not be able to charge them, they still have to pass a willpower test to refrain from assaulting. But at the same time, the unit suffering from Bloodlust in this instance will be able to access the quote-unquote charge attack reroll even during assaults and even during subsequent rounds of combat against the same enemy units if they had previously assaulted successfully. So this means that bloodlusted units are going to be even more dangerous than before, and to some smaller extent less controllable by their commanders. But this makes a whole lot of change sense to me, this change. If you have a unit of frothing at the mouth berserkers fighting on the streets of a village, they don't care if they ran into somebody around the corner or if they can see them coming a mile away. The resulting violence should be quite terrifying regardless. There is actually no functional change to dispel, even though it's mentioned in the rules update. There has just been the removal of the phrase which implied that dispel would work without causing stress on the unit doing the dispelling, since now blocking spells doesn't cause stress either. Elite keywords wording now matches the way it has been described in errata. Now you have all the situations where elite is applied clearly spelled out, and also, pun intended, the fact that tinge and spell blocking rolls don't apply the elite keyword. Intimidating has also been clarified to work when the unit is engaged or it engages an enemy unit, and also that a unit can only ever suffer from the effects of intimidating once per activation. Nothing groundbreaking, but decent tidy work here. Preferred terrains component that allowed units with the preferred terrain rule to add to their movement value while they were adjacent to the preferred terrain has now been removed, and I really like this change. It's one more thing that we don't have to remember, and also it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that a unit is going to be able to use types of terrain as quote-unquote acceleration strips on their way to charge the enemy, for example. if you are an excellent woodsman and moving in the woods causes you no discomfort or disadvantage, all the power to you, but you don't sprint faster just because you like strolling in a forest, now do you? Oh boy, this one has already seen some discussion online, and I'm fully expecting this one to be FAQ'd again uh, pretty soon. The scout keyword was supposed to get fixed, in that there would be no more discussion over how scout should actually work. Now it's been spelled out as per the FAQ entry, errata entry earlier, that when a scouting unit comes to the battlefield mid-game, it can choose to sacrifice whatever part of their activation, and they only get that single simple action. Okay, that doesn't matter too much now anyway, since the freedom of choice has been widened on what actions units can perform anyway. But what trips me up at the moment is that there is this part on the scout text which is supposed to slide into the part of the rule where it discusses scouts coming onto the battlefield after the game has already started. And for some reason they have chosen to write your scout units must always follow these rules. And this is a bit problematic, because if this is supposed to only tighten the language around when the scouts arrive to the battlefield mid-game, this sentence really shouldn't be there in my opinion, because the way I can also read this to mean now is that scout units deploying at the beginning of the game during the standard quote-unquote deployment phase could be able to use this rule to deploy adjacent to a table edge as long as they don't enter the enemy deployment zone. And the ramifications of this would be huge. Let's say I have a unit of Tundra Marauders with my Hersir model, and I win the initiative. How enticing it would be to me to deploy this unit of Tundra Marauders right outside the deployment zone of my opponent, right on their doorstep, saying, okay, if you want to deploy anything within 12 strides of my leader model, I'm going to Snow Leopard tattoo you, and then I'm gonna hit you again, and then I'm gonna throw some caltrops under my feet, and what you're gonna do about it. And this doesn't feel like what they were looking to do with this rule at all. So I think this is simply a poorly thought out wording, and I expect this to be resolved via an FAQ soon enough. And if that is not the case, then the weather forecast will be with some heavy expectation of really aggressively deploying scout units going forward. The wording under placement of traps, such as for example the set caltrops of the Tundra Marauders, was a bit lax. It simply previously referred to impassable game elements, and there was some spirited discussion on whether models were impassable game elements or whether this was simply meant to refer to terrain pieces. And now it's been clarified that yes, you can actually place traps underneath units, friend and foe alike, and this makes trap placing units increasingly powerful. You can now for example, throw caltrops under enemy large or cavalry units, meaning that there is no way for them to avoid suffering the ill effects. The pioneers can deploy their trap in order to have it automatically trigger should the enemy unit activate at all, and so forth and so forth. So it would seem that somebody at Corvuspelli really loves Tundra Marauders and really loves pioneers, because both these units got buffed to you know what in this update. Both are capable of double attacking with their current rule set, and both are able to deploy traps right underneath the enemy, and both are scouts to boot, so they might be able to access this new way of deploying via scout if that actually were a thing that would come to stay in the game. So buy Tundra Marauder and Pioneer shares while you still can. A nice bookkeeping change has been made as in regards to terrain. There was a problem previously where rugged was both a terrain keyword and then there was a type of terrain named rugged terrain, and now the rugged terrain has been changed into rough terrain, and rugged now always refers to the keyword, and this is really a good change. Several units in the game already have the preferred terrain rugged keyword and or ability. And there was discussion on how these units should, for example, work with, let's say, dense forest terrain. We have the Warg Riders of the Northern Tribes. They have preferred terrain rugged. Okay, how about how are they supposed to work with rugged terrain, forests that are rugged, can they see through them or not, and so forth. But now it's clear they only ignore the rugged keyword, and that's that. Case closed. Moving on. Fog markers now also get their own specific rules, which I really like. All fog markers cause tinge on any units that end their activations near them, and they are important in some adventures. At least one feat incorporates fog tokens, and I would imagine that future scenarios and or feats or standalone adventures will also have fog in them. It's not beyond possibility that in the future some, for example, science units would be able to generate fog also. Lethal terrain has been changed so as to cause the lethal terrain to inflict damage upon units only when they become adjacent to one rather than every time they're activating. Although I don't know how impactful a change this is. Towards the end of the rulebook, you can find the table which lists examples of all the basic terrain pieces, and there is no lethal terrain there. I have never played a game where we had a piece of lethal terrain on the table, so I really can't tell how big or small this change is going forward. But again, maybe there is a unit in the future that's capable of changing a unit changing the terrain to lethal or something, and then this is going to be coming up going forward. All right, few miscellaneous items before we go to my final end rant. Now there's a clear statement on how contradictions and simultaneous effects should be resolved going forward. If after everything is said and done, there is still a contradiction between, for example, what to do in a certain situation, then the person with the initiative can have the final word. And I like this. I don't know that this is going to be coming up all that often, but at least now you have a definite way of resolving a difficult situation and moving on, keeping the game flowing, so to speak. So I like this. Likewise, if there are simultaneous effects, which there are in many cases, for example, rerolls from charging and defending units that have innate reroll abilities, previously there was no clear guideline on how to determine who goes first, but now it's been written down in the update that the player resolving the action must determine who goes first. This isn't strictly in line with having the contradictions be resolved by the final word of the player who has the initiative, but this does enforce the fact that the active unit is the one holding the cards. Let's say I have a unit of mine that's charging a hegemony unit led by Drago. okay, now both of us have access to rerolls. Who has to reroll first? Now, as I am the active player going forward, I can say, okay, Tracker, do you want to reroll anything? And then I get to see, okay, am I going to be able to push damage through with my original roll, or do I need to risk a reroll going forward? And I like this. This feels intuitive. It feels in line with the other stuff in the game. So a good change as a result. It's also being clarified as per, I think, previous erratas that troops always have line of sight to themselves and adjacent troops, which resolves the so-called forest controversy. And it's also being clarified also now in the core rules that you can declare move to stand still, and here you go. Passing has also been reworded to be more clear, and I think this has already been covered in erratas and FAQs previously, so no big changes here, but now if and when you should be passing should be rather clear. Okay, now I think we have covered at least most of the important changes. Please let me know in the comment section if and when I missed something important so other people can learn from my mistakes. I really appreciate all the people who have commented on my battle report telling me what we got wrong so that others may learn from those comments instead of taking any mistakes that they see to be the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But let's end this one with something fun. I thought it would be nice to speculate on what Northern Tribes units are going to be impacted positively by the 1.5 update and which ones will see their stars diminished as a result. Remember that this listing is going to be coming out of my backside squarely, so don't take this to be the ultimate truth. I'm simply speculating with my first thoughts over here. Okay, the units whose shares I'm going to be personally buying from here on out. Firstly, Aalborg. Our war chief got more survivable thanks to now being able to avoid enemy missile attacks while they're staying within 5 strides of allied units and or by being escorted to the front line by a friendly unit. But also I think the Warg and the Crow got more powerful now that a full-on stress unit that has no activation tokens can access this ability to do something other than rest. And since the Warg and the Crow does not cause a point of stress or a activation token to be applied to the unit doing the activating, you can effectively get as many as 2 normal activations out of a full stress unit via this ability, which is pretty cool. Another problem that was, or a problem that was present with Aalborg previously was that you would need to have a heterogenic mix of both Orc and Varang units accessible throughout the battle in order for you to be able to access Varg and the Crow until the very last round of the game. But now with the way you can actually for example, charge a character out of a unit, you have more flexible access to both Varang and Orc units if you choose to mix the two via the War Alliance ability. Let's say it's late in the game and I'm playing Aalborg, I'm playing a mixture of Varang and Orc units, but lo and behold, all my other Orc units have been destroyed and I only have Varang units left. And I have Lotta leading my skin changers, for example, and I desperately want to get Lotta to one place, or a unit to one place, and then half activate a Varang unit somewhere. Now I can break off Lotta to do a charge, for example, at something, and then trigger. Now that I have activated an Orc unit, I get to trigger the effects on a Varang unit, or vice versa. I can use a Varang unit to break out Lotta from her unit via the Varg and the Crow. So Aalborg should be even more powerful a pick going forward. The Tundra Marauders, as already discussed several times over, have gotten better and better in this update. Regardless of whether Scout actually turns out to be as silly as it can be interpreted to be as of right now, simply the fact that they are capable of double attacking is extremely powerful. And my favorite combination, that is the Tundra Marauders with the Hersir, has also become even more powerful, because now with the double attack you can access the Hersir's to die killing ability, that is Berserker Rage, twice per activation for all the more effect, and also the not one step back command skill, which automatically allows the Hersir's unit to pass a willpower test, has just become even more powerful, since if the Tundra Marauders ever find themselves more than 1 point over stress, even if they fail their resulting test like they usually should, the Hersir can just stomp their feet and go, you're not going anywhere, I'm paying a command token and we're staying put. So looking forward to fielding my Tundra Marauders and Hersir going forward. If you are a regular viewer of this channel, I have been very much banging the drum that the Evoker needs help for quite some time now, and this patch, if we can call it that, really helps the Evoker out a lot. It's way easier to keep the Evoker alive here on out thanks to the ranged attack against characters change. She can block spells from anywhere on the battlefield, which is a nice quality of life upgrade on her, and due to the way that morale, stress and demoralization has changed, means that there should be more Orc units fleeing going forward. Her Delegate of the Ancestors ability should be more impactful going forward. So this is really nice to see. And this all happens before we get access to the Rock Troll. Interesting to see if the Evoker helps that large unit out in any way. Your Njords, Prime Warriors and all other characters who like to be escorted but enjoy fighting alone have now just gone up, since it's entirely possible to have one of these characters join a unit of, let's say, cheap and cheerful Orc hunters, have the hunters escort them to the front line to provide some protection and action economy, and then have the unit break off and fight on its own. One of the reasons I have struggled with the Prime Warrior, for example, has been that I have been finding it hard to find the time and the activations to develop their position, so that accessing Orc Warriors honor and experience and rage has become realistic. But going forward, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was first who suggested on the Discord that you can simply have the Prime Warrior in a unit and charge them out of the unit to trigger experience and rage, and then have the unit that was just escorting the Prime Warrior pile in on the same melee. And this sounds like an excellent combination that I'm really looking to run going forward. Also, all Northern Tribes units capable of inflicting states upon their enemies have just gotten better, especially all the units that are capable of inflicting disarmed and or vulnerable have just seen their stocks rise due to these states' ability to stop enemies from using push modifiers on their attack/defense rolls. And as this, I feel, is this state's infliction is one of the core strengths of the Northern Tribes faction, they have just become even more powerful as a result. Okay, and then some quick fire sale before the stocks plummet on some other units. Celica, who I haven't covered yet in a unit analysis piece, but I'm planning to at some point, I feel has seen her stocks dip as a result of these changes. I have had some success with Celica firing the bow of claws at a bunched up formation of enemies, wounding and killing characters via her ability to target several units at once. But now that characters can shield themselves from her shots by staying close to friendly units, her usability in this regard is going to be greatly diminished. She is still going to be a valuable piece, but this niche that she was able to fill previously is now effectively gone. To a lesser extent, the same applies to the ice archers. I have been sniping some enemy characters with them previously with some good success, but that should be really hard going forward against enemies who know what they're doing. So the ice archers are also somewhat suffering from the changes of this update. To a greatly lessened extent, the tattooist takes a small hit since hallucinogenic mushrooms doesn't seem to work, or at least it has very little meaning as of right now. I'm going to send a email to the FAQ address and ask how hallucinogenic mushrooms are supposed to work going forward, and if whether the ability should be changed as to be usable or it becoming a good idea to use it again going forward. The battle scarred are awesome and you should run them basically in every list, but this rules update has created a new way of potentially dealing with them, and that is that demoralizing them through piling stress on them. Then again, if one is running my favorite combo of the battle scarred with the wise main, they are rolling orange, orange, yellow on their willpower roll, and they have access to a reroll, so breaking them should be quite hard anyway. But now the unit has at least one more soft counter available, and I think that is a good thing from the game's balance perspective. Phew, this one was quite a long video. Hopefully you found it to be helpful. To end this one off, I would like to really congratulate Corvuspelli on their commitment to Warcrow and getting the rules right and getting the rules better. We have been getting a steady stream of updates, erratas, FAQs of late, and all of these have really helped move the needle to make Warcrow all the more better a game. From the get-go, I felt that this game has excellent bones and some really amazing things in it, and now that they are getting the smaller stuff right also, I can't help but feel that this game is quickly finding its place and becoming the game, at least for yours truly. There are interesting new options to test out, interesting new strategies to leverage, interesting new dangers to face, and if you aren't playing Warcrow yet, what are you waiting for? It seems that now is the best time so far to jump right in. We have access to almost 2 complete factions now. Third is being released as we speak, and if you are looking to field the forces of Scions of Yaldabaoth or the Feudum, then your time is almost nigh, since their general releases start happening soon enough. Thank you for sticking with me. Hope to see you on the battlefields of Lindworm soon enough. Have a great day, fellow travelers.